Tenemos a Rodolfo Munoz, que, speaking about being in the struggle for so long, Rodolfo, as an attorney, could be, I guess, living somewhere in the Alamo Heights area, or what is it new over there, Stone Oak, or over there somewhere in the ritzy area, if he just pursued money interests, but he instead pursues representing the poor and the indigenous people of San Antonio, to fight for their rights as indigenous people. Rodolfo Munoz, por favor, can you come up front?
Right, thank you, brother. Let me darle las gracias a Antonio de vuelta, because these things need to get initiated. Somebody needs to take the initiative, and Antonio es uno de esos de que no nomás platica, sino que se levanta y actúa y he brings these things about. So I think he deserves all the credit. And one of the things that I appreciate most about Antonio is that he knows that him and I differ on a lot of things. We differ in terms of the way we interpret things, strategically, history, qué raza, qué no es, that kind of thing. And that's important because especially you kids that are here need to, I think, understand that we are doing something, especially in this kind of thing, that has never taken place in significant ways before. The story of the United States is a story made by the invaders, by the Europeans, by the people who arrived there. The reason for that, or one of the reasons for my taking issue with some of the things that have been said here, and I know los carnales, everybody here, and they know my position, but let me state it anyway, because we're not here to have everybody agree. If we can stimulate some discussion, then by all means. Pero it's been mentioned that Indians have citizenship. For example, let me start from there. Para no decirlo en una manera vulgar, let me say that that's a fraud. It's a lie. Because the only time that Indians were given citizenship in the United States is in 1824 by a statute. Como hemos dicho, soy abogado, and I need to make some of those distinctions. You students, you need to think about what you want to be, because we need a lot of legally trained people. We need lawyers. You know, I'm not a good example, because everybody nowadays seems to be hung up on making money, and I've never made any. And I'm not going to make any. No, at one time I did, but I'm not going to make any anymore. And the reason I'm not going to is because I keep saying what I sincerely believe, which is that there is a policy of genocide against the American Indian. When they gave the Indian people that 1824 citizenship, that's a statute. That's not the same as the Constitution. Compare it with the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Let's look at it this way. Blacks and slaves used to be on an equal level. Both of them were inferior to the white people, to the Europeans. The only thing that has happened to make it possible for Obama to be president is that they amended the Constitution. After the Civil War, they amended the Constitution, and that 3/4 clause that referred to Indian people was stricken. That's because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's what made the government of the United States. They made it pursuant to that Constitution. They made an agreement with themselves. And it's critical, and there's a whole bunch of things that I could throw at you, but I want to try to make an impact upon, especially those of you that might not have thought about these things too much. But the Europeans came here and here invented themselves as the Americans. And the way they did that is by saying, we are the people from here. How could they be the people from here if there was already a people here? There is something called the Discovery Doctrine, which I went to law school in the New World. It was bringing all that gold bullion back to Spain. England started encouraging piracy and the pirates attacking, and then they got into a war. And then Spain built that armada, the incredible armada that almost conquered England. They were fighting over how to exploit us, how to exploit here. This court decision of the United States Supreme Court makes it explicit. I mean, read pages, if you ever get a chance, pages 572 to 573. You guys, if you're really interested, you can come and look at it and just take a look at that. Because I'm going to tell you what it says, but you can check me or check on me to see that it in fact says that. Because what it says is that the Europeans were concerned about how much damage they were doing to each other in fighting over who was going to conquer here. Spain and Britain were fighting over the spoils, and they almost one conquered the other, and they didn't know who was going to conquer who, and they didn't know who could come up with a better army and all that. The United States Supreme Court says there in 1823, says, hey, the resolution was the Discovery Doctrine, which says that we are going to make an agreement. We Europeans, and these Europeans were making this before they started the 13 colonies. They made an agreement, the Supreme Court tells us, that wherever a European established hegemony, wherever a European prince came in and said, I've discovered this, then the other Europeans were going to honor that, and they were going to say, hey, you know, they got there first. They started establishing hegemony, and so therefore we're going to let it go from them. What the Supreme Court tells us is that there were two things wrong with us that allowed the Europeans to do this. And one of them was that we didn't pray like them. We were not Christians. And the other one was the culture. We were of a different culture. And because of those two things, the Supreme Court says it a la bravota there. Because of those two things, we were non-existent as human beings. We were not beings who had rights which the Europeans needed to respect. And so the land was declared vacant. In the law, it's a legal fiction that the land was vacant, and so therefore we didn't count, and so therefore they pushed us, and the only thing that they needed to do, and this is still the law now, the only thing that they need to do is to move us out of the way, however they do that, by killing us, by conquest, by purchase, by making treaties with her, however. The idea is that we're just sitting on the land until they take us out of it. So, and again, coming back to 1824, in 1824 they passed they call it Indian Citizenship Act. Again, I told you about the blacks. After the Civil War, they changed the Constitution because the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. If something is inconsistent with that, it doesn't work. So if you wanted to change the status of the blacks, you changed the Constitution. That's what they did. They scratched out the 3 quarters clause. But they left the clause immediately before it that says excluding Indians not taxed. Indians have been excluded from the Constitution forever. So now bring that forward to 1924 when they make the Indian Citizenship Act. That's just the statute of Congress. That's the U.S. Congress saying, hey, look, you know, we're talking about everybody's free, everybody's equal, everybody's the Constitution, and we're a democracy and all this kind of stuff. Republicans. The Constitution says that the states are entitled to a Republican government. That's in the Constitution. A Republican government means representation. The only way that the Europeans could create the Constitution is by being the people from here. They were represented, and so therefore they met, and they constituted they made the Constitution. Well, again, the reason for that is because we don't count. And we've never counted. And if they were going to make us count, and this is where I seriously take issue with everybody, because they nos están dando a tole con el dedo the way they always have. They didn't change the Constitution. The Congress of the United States passed this thing they call the Indian Citizenship Act. And so that simply says, okay, everybody in the United States, everybody born in the United States is a citizen. But it still has in the Constitution that clause excluding Indians, not blacks. Why is all that relevant? You know, how is it that we are still trying to understand what happened? I can explain it best by what happened to me. I was born in Kingsville, between here and Laredo, 40 miles from Corpus. And my jefita used to tell me, mijo, I remember when we were in carpas out there before Kingsville was developed. I've been putting some things together lately, and I remember now that my jefita lived to be 90 years old, and she died in 2001. Kingsville, the town of Kingsville, was created by the King Ranch in 1913. When my mother was talking to me about, hey, we used to live in tents out there, it didn't sink in. Because I was like most people today, I don't pay attention to the chronology, to the history. The history seems like, hey, you know, when they're talking about it, you can't put it together with what is happening. It seems like something that happened a long time ago. It already finished, and so forth and so on. I'm still licensed, and I want to tell you, Antonio told me to keep it brief, but he didn't say how much. But there's a lot of things happening. I like Milo, the professor that was here, talking about what's happening, and the things that are talking about where we're going, and that you have all kinds of raza in different positions. Let me tell you something that I've never talked too much about publicly, but it's something that I think is significant because it talks about soldiers. Even though I'm in a lawsuit where I'm telling the federal court that they don't have jurisdiction over me because I am Coahuiltecan, I'm Indian, and they never conquered us, and they never made a treaty with us, and they don't have any basis of jurisdiction. And I'm saying that, and they don't want to deal with it.